So, would you drink a tea that smelled and tasted so foul that it made you puke? What if it gave you enlightenment or wisdom, let you talk to Mother Earth, gave you a free rocket ship ride to another planet? Okay. What if you had debilitating anxiety or depression, or maybe substance abuse is destroying your life? What if this tea could help you recover? I mean, that's not bad for a tea. Except, yeah, it's not just any old tea, it's ayahuasca. And that rocket ship ride? Yeah, that's just you turning into psycho jello for an hour, kaleidoscopic in the tropics, as it were. Made of Banisteriopsis cacti vine and Psychotria viridis bush, usually those two plants. And other names are Kayapi, Chacruna, Daime, Natem, Vegetal, Yahe, Dead Man's Vine, I love that one, and the Businessman's Trip. You take this plant and smash it together with this plant, and bam! You get God knows what, an extravaganza of anything. Aliens, Persian palaces, hypertech planets, Jesus, a dead grandmother, a zombie grandmother alien masquerading as Jesus on the market for Persian palaces. I don't know. You'll find all kinds of claims that this drink has been used since the dawn of indigenous life in South America, but we really only know going back 300 or 400 years around the tri-border region of Ecuador, Colombia, and Peru. European literature first mentions it when Jose Chantre Herrera made a report in 1770. He mentions a shamanic ceremony from decades earlier, and he describes it with all the disdain that religion could offer in the not-so-enlightened Enlightenment era. And the idea that it's been used for millennium, it might come from this odd standard view that primitive people are somewhat frozen in time, as if discovery and development only happens when the Europeans show up. An idea that, it stood up with studies that show traces of ayahuasca's alkaloids, harmine and DMT, in historical artifacts like hair or ceramic bowls, etc. But those chemical compounds are in many plants. They even show up in cooked meat. And whenever the use of ayahuasca actually started, those old traditions eventually got replaced anyway by new stories that spread through indigenous and mestizo communities via traveling shamans across the Amazon and further south. It was a connecting thread as people's lives were uprooted, reassembled, tragically, violently, during the rubber industry tree tapping boom of the late 1800s. And then when the bottom fell out of the South American rubber industry in the early 1900s, after Southeast Asian rubber plantations took hold, ayahuasca usage got folded into religion, similar to the blood of Christ concept. But, I guess maybe it's the stewed and bludgeoned guts of a plant spirit soul. The religious groups, Santo Daime, Uñada Vegetal, and Barquina, things like that, they grew out of this vegetalismo shamanism tied to growing mestizo identity, where Catholicism was mixing with indigenous beliefs of the supernatural being, in everything. But how things changed. Today, ayahuasca seems dominated by educated middle-class spiritualists from outside the Amazon basin, from southern Brazil, the Americas overall, Asia, Europe, Australia. And they appropriate the drink as a religious experience or for wellness. This new group of people, they seek out self-actualization through experiences, rifling through numerous cultural, political, social viewpoints, and mix the desired ingredients into their own preferred cosmopolitan lifestyle, tweaked as needed, and they ignore the origins in community survival, anti-colonialism, emancipation, etc. It's kind of, I guess, like making a tasty cultural mixed salad from some buffet of world experience that they enjoy privileged access to, transitory access as well. And it's all, well, wrapped in yoga pants and social media posts to better oneself. Okay, I went off on a tangent there. This is not to reduce all ayahuasca users to that identity, sorry. But when you dig into this, that's a general common identity that comes up. But I digress. I really want to talk science. I want to talk the opportunities that ayahuasca provides and maybe touch on some of the dangers just in case. Now, I could go into the rituals and the religious groups and such, a little further, but there's so many videos out there that you could check. It's often just variations of the same thing. Vines are chopped and mashed and cooked in water with chacruna shrub leaves and often other ingredients for half a day. And participants, they often eat bland diets of food, no alcohol, no perfumes, etc. to cleanse their system in preparation. And then they sit in a big wooden longhouse or maloca with mattresses, a bucket, and toilet paper nearby for purging from both ends. There's chanting, tobacco smoke, icaros, songs, perfumed water. People then descend into this weird mental world, right? Watched over by a maestro, curandero, ayahuasquero, I don't know, whatever the leader wants to be called. And then maybe a candle after a while is lit as the people come out of their technicolor visions and they slowly stumble off the mental roller coaster with a changed brain. And scientists want to know more about those changes. But there are hurdles that exist to understanding what's happening and to those benefits. One, of course, being that DMT is a Schedule I drug across much of the world. Also, ayahuasca, it can be many things, not just what science has defined it as, 2 ingredients from each of those 2 plants, N,N-dimethyltryptamine or DMT and a monoamine oxidase inhibitor, usually harmine. And in this, they, by the way, seem to disregard everything else in the plant, which is problematic and a lost opportunity. Another problem is it smells and tastes foul. But once researchers like Jordi Riba of Spain and his team, they found a way to freeze dry it and put that drink into a powder, into a pill. And they began proper studies, single blind, double blind, placebos, all that jazz, without everyone getting punched in the face by an urge to hurl, from the nasty ass smell. I guess that's that telltale sign that you might not be on a placebo. It kind of ruins the study. But now they could do more controlled dosages and really get into studies and understand things. In fact, one study, as a side note, when they didn't have capsules for whatever planning error, they had to go back to actual ayahuasca tea. And for the placebo, they made it out of coffee, unsweetened cocoa powder, and balsamic vinegar to, better mimic the authentic ayahuasca taste. I wonder which one this is. Anyway, scientists have used this synthesized pharmahuasca to level up their research. As an example, Reba was able to confirm that the vine's beta-carbolines are stopping the enzyme monoamine oxidase A in our guts and livers from breaking down DMT before it can get up here, snuggle up to these serotonin 5-HT2A, 1A receptors in our brains, where all the psychedelics go to play. And now, a few years later, a few studies and neuroimaging scans later, we've learned a few things. So, I don't know, let's see what some of those highlights are. Oh, also, though, I should first say I am not here to advise on whether you should do it. I am not a doctor. Talk to yours if you are considering ayahuasca. There are risks. It is an illegal substance in many parts of the world.
Oh, no.
But starting with depression. So studies of treatment-resistive depression patients have shown benefits from 1, 2, 7 days, even up to a month later. I mean, hell, maybe that's why we haven't seen more studies or a pill created, because, a pharmaceutical company making a pill you can only use or you only need once every few months? Versus daily? Where's the money in that? I don't know. I digress. In general naturalistic studies, not depression patients, there are still signs of benefits after 6 months, even a year later. So one has to ask, what's happening? Well, some antidepressive tools like SSRI meds, they target the monoamine hypothesis. And this is an idea linking depression to deficits in serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine. But SSRIs aren't silver bullets for that depression werewolf, as it were. And they take weeks to show benefits. Ayahuasca not only interacts with the serotonin system differently, and you get more serotonin because the enzyme that breaks down DMT, well, it also breaks down serotonin and dopamine. So with ayahuasca shutting down that demolition crew for a bit, you build up serotonin. And these receptors are activated directly, immediately, helping within hours. Ayahuasca also lowers the default mode network hyperconnectivity, DMN hyperconnectivity. This is in the brain. It's associated with daydreaming, wandering thoughts, thinking about the future or the past, and depressive thought patterns, stewing in your own juices, as it were. It's not something that SSRIs do reliably. A little like the ego is dissolved with ayahuasca, at least long enough to, see the world, your traumas, yourself a little differently. And you find maybe a little emotional catharsis and reprocess things. It's, I guess, the brain equivalent of unplug it and plug it back in. And also, it's worth noting that this is often in a guided setting. If the participant was smart and picked a reputable retreat or was in a religious setting, where visions are discussed, there's some therapy potential in all of that, right? What does ayahuasca do for something like anxiety? Well, that it does involve separate mechanisms, but they overlap with antidepressant as well. That DMN is often hyperactive with anxiety, not just with depression. And when we're stewing and ruminating, well, ayahuasca downshifts this network, lowering those obsessive thoughts. And the benefits are not just in the moment with nervousness and fear, etc., but they also affect long-standing patterns. They break them. And brain imaging shows an increase in activity in parts of the brain that are involved in interoception and emotional regulation, right? We become more mindful. We're less cognitively rigid and less judgmental in our awareness. So what else? PTSD. difficult to treat because, well, it often has comorbidities, essentially. But we find the same reactions and often for the same reasons. With ayahuasca, the person revisits tragedies. And ayahuasca can promote neuroplasticity that helps us restructure, get out of maladapted neural pathways, basically. And we're rewiring things. What wires? Well, some suggestions are the sigma non-opioid intracellular receptor, or sigma-1. Guys, gloss over there for a second. It promotes neurogenesis and synaptic plasticity, memory reconsolidation, fear extinction, all that kind of good stuff, right? And there's others as well, FKBR, FKBP5, if you're interested in digging further. I mean, this stuff is interesting because it even affects eating disorders. There have been people studied and found benefit there. Substance abuse. The dopamine system is compromised, less sensitive, off kilter. Reward centers in the brain don't function the way they normally should. And there's a general malaise about life for people with substance abuse. And between all of the benefits of ayahuasca, turning off some brain areas, making other parts talk when they don't normally, and that neuroplasticity, that brain repair, substance abuse benefits too. In fact, we might not need all of the ingredients. There's no DMT required. Yeah, you probably didn't know that in enough quantity, Banisteriopsis caapi is hallucinogenic. Actually, so is Psychotria viridis, but we're talking about the vine right now. And once upon a time, that's all ayahuasca was, the vine. Beaten, stewed, and drank by shamans, not people visiting them, to gain insight basically into life, or to understand the plant kingdom, or to give advice to somebody that came to see them. It's kind of like your therapist going to see them and they get drunk, plastered, and then tell you what's wrong with you and how to fix it. But today, we have things like the Centro Taquewasi, for example. It's a center for treating substance abuse disorders in Tarapoto, Peru. The center treats people during a 9-month stay, and every couple of months, there's a purgahuasca ceremony. I don't know, maybe it's purgahuasca? I think it's purgahuasca. Purgahuasca ceremony. That's what they call it. And it's just the vine, drank warm and in a higher quantity so that you are sure to purge. And vomiting is apparently seen as part of the therapy. In those doses, it can produce visual effects and powerful insights and later very vivid dreams. And this is all with therapeutic potential, despite lacking DMT. It's worth noting that the harmine in Banisteriopsis caapi has been found to increase the number of nerve progenitor cells, possibly important in treating damage caused by substance abuse, right? Now think a little further there. Brain diseases. In fact, that harmine induced neuroplasticity and neurogenesis comes up a lot in discussions about things like Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, right? Still a little preliminary, but hey, scientists, screw the politicians holding back dollars here. Do more studies, find a damn way before we all lose our marbles. But what's the problem then? So why haven't we flooded the market with amazing ayahuasca-inspired happy pills or drinks? Again, it takes time, and ayahuasca is a Schedule I drug in the US, in many parts of the world. And even though at the end of the day, it's just a few plants and alkaloids that are honestly in a lot of things, even in us, naturally. So, wait, does that make people illegal? Yeah, I guess that's a problem, isn't it? I mean, the demographics associated with various substances, regardless of fact, right? Ayahuasca might struggle for legitimacy because its South American history has a lot of black and brown faces. The US government, they're historically, currently not very fond of that. I didn't do it. Anyway, things have been changing. In Brazil, it was legalized for religious use in 1992. Canada and the U.S. have recently given the Santo Daime Church exemptions to use it as a sacrament in some places. But all of that is at risk now. Research funding has been slashed. A political shift is attempting to drag us back to the 1950s, 1890s. I'm losing track. But, people do still find their way to ayahuasca retreats. So maybe there's some good to be had. Politics and laws be damned. Ayahuasca is found over and over again, by the way, to be quite safe. And any detriments are temporary. There is no physical addiction. There's just so many opportunities here. But it is worth noting that, yes, on very rare occasions, some people have had a psychotic break, mania, or other crisis meltdown from ayahuasca. People with schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, or other personality disorders or psychosis should steer clear. If you're taking amphetamines, sleeping pills, antidepressants, if you combine ayahuasca with SSRIs and you build up serotonin to deadly levels, that's not good. Steer clear. And also pregnant, breastfeeding mothers, they should likely steer clear as well. But again, ayahuasca is generally safe. That doesn't mean there aren't other risks, though. Whether from bad actors or bad luck, the end result, it can be pretty bad. I mean, looky-loos with money on drug tourism holidays seeking connections and cures to sadness. They find shamans in poor communities, sometimes barely more experienced than them with the substance, just having the benefits of access to plant materials and whatever else they put in it. By the way, there are 100 things that can and have been put in ayahuasca: tobacco, coca, datura, scopolamine. I found a reference online to gasoline. There are 97 or more ingredients identified as having been thrown into the ayahuasca pot to cook down in various communities around South America. And nature doesn't always build to exacting, repeatable measurements. As an example, Psychotria viridis can be inconsistent in its level of DMT, from a lot to none at all. Not only do shamans have different recipes and unpredictable plants, they are humans, also unpredictable. They are not saints, and they are not always wise. But they can be opportunistic. Part of the healing and therapeutic power of ayahuasca is that it leaves the user prone to suggestibility. And that's also an opportunity to be taken advantage of. And it has happened, sometimes violently. Psychedelics are not some shortcut to a better way. The experience can take you down a treacherous path like psychic darts and the Jedi dark side and tempting us into the whatever moment, right? So before you take that trip, do your research. And happy tea time? Turpentine, Twigsy. I'm going to try this again. Oh, this is really foul.